Ladies and gentlemen, we are live on Thursday, March 31st. Once again here on neighborhoodnewsstudio.com. We got a great schedule ahead of us today. We got John O'Loughlin kicking us off at 11, George Webb at 12 p.m., Mark Kulak will be coming back, so no more replays today at 2 p.m., Bill Taylor at 4 p.m., and to round out the daily schedule, we have a newcomer on the list. Peter Duke will be joining us at 5 p.m. to close out the daily schedule here at neighborhoodnewsstudio.com. Well, Mr. O'Loughlin, McDuff, it's your turn. It's 11 o'clock. Take it away, sir.
All right, Andy DeBala, thank you very much, and it's great to be part of the team here at Neighborhood News Studio. With all that great content, I think it's only fair that you also be aware of some more great content coming up tonight on McDuff Lives with Professor Hamamoto for a Thursday night duo. So a lot of great content all day long, and stay tuned with Neighborhood News Studio for all of that great content. But my show, 8 o'clock tonight, will be another a great conversation with Professor Hamamoto. Thanks again to Andy for the introduction, and I see David Underdown's here, and that's fabulous. Hello, Christy Liebel, and Jimmy Beam is here. Mobster is here, and Kathy Sue, my dear. I need your YouTube ID. If you can email me your YouTube ID, I can put you on the on the moderator. You'd be my very first one, and I that's what happens now. I have to have your YouTube ID, or I can't get you hooked up. That's the way it is. McDuff Lives 3. Yeah, that's my content over at McDuff Lives 3. I've been co-broadcasting this week on my other two channels, just to make sure everybody knows that we're in danger of losing those two channels because of multiple strikes. So that's why we have McDuff Lives 3, and we now have 700 and some on McDuff Lives 3. But the original channel has over 7,000, and therefore, all of those lost sheep need to find their way over here to McDuff Lives 3. Please subscribe to it. Yeah, Jimmy, I did too. Last night, Dave Underdown. I wish I could have gone on another hour, but I'm afraid the way my brain works nowadays, I wake up at 5. And it's usually just, buzzing with ideas, and I get up and have coffee, and then I'm sitting at the computer doing research. So at 10 o'clock, 11, that's about it, man. I'm not up there with Mark Kulak at 2 a.m., not me. All right, let me have a sip of ginger tea, and we'll get started. You may wonder where Olivia is. She's been just staying over in the other room in case I needed the Osprey sound for my show from the backroom studio. But since she's missing, we should play the Ospreys here from Mystery Island. They are back, and just anytime you want to walk outside, you can probably see and hear those beautiful birds. Jimmy's on McDuff Lives 3. Excellent. Yeah, glad to have you wherever you are. But once again, danger, Will Robinson on the first two channels. We need to build up our subscriptions on number 3. Okay. My topic today, this is Mindfields, so I get to pick the topic, and it's the Technocracy. And this is important because we're always working, we're working very, very hard to understand what are the forces behind the curtain. Is it one evil force that's manipulating everything? Are there 2 evil forces manipulating everything, or 3, or 100? Is the ultimate power an oligarchy, or is it an empire? Is it an empire of dukedoms and medieval serfdom? or an empire of liberty, of happiness. Remember, that was Jefferson's definition of what America should be, an empire of liberty. I'm still not sure. I like the idea of empire under any circumstances, but if liberty is the the only thing that binds us together, then that sounds pretty good. You know, my bottom line is, when right now, this my opinion today, hot off the presses, John's opinion today. The technocracy is what's behind the curtain. In other words, there's not a person there. It's just a combination of all kinds of computer programs and intellectual ideas that have become procedures and routines, and the gears of this machine are what we call the technocracy. Now, there's a man who's been showing up kind of everywhere. Let me get up the Corbett report with him. His name is Iain Davis, and if you don't mind, I'm going to give me a second to cue him up. Okay, here's what I want to do. I'm going to start off by sharing Unlimited Hangouts article written by Iain Davis, because I think this is right at the tip of my thinking. So what am I thinking? I'm thinking that this guy's right. Okay, simple as that. So here is, oops, I wanted to share that. Sorry. Now, this is Whitney Webb's platform, Unlimited Hangout. She's done fantastic work on Jeffrey Epstein and the Maxwell family and all of that, and many other areas. I kudos to Whitney Webb and Unlimited Hangout, where the article, though, here is written by Iain Davis. And let's see if we can. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to just kind of scroll through this as I read it. You can read along if you can see that well. Technocracy, the operating system for the new international rules-based order. The International Rules-Based Order, or IRBO, is under threat, and global power is shifting. As East and West rekindle old enmities, we are led to believe that this struggle will determine the future of international relations and the direction of nation states. However, the global transformation is not led by national governments, but by a global network of stakeholders, and global technocracy is their goal. And here they are. You can see Klaus there with the strings in his hand, and the strings are attached to his puppets. Xi, Putin, and who's that other guy? Brandon, yeah. In this article, we will explore the true nature of the international rules-based order, IRBO, and examine the forces that shape it. We will consider if the narratives we are commonly fed stack up. It is widely accepted that the IRBO is undergoing disruptive change. That transformation is often reported as an eastward shift in the balance of power between nation states. It is said that this new emerging international order will be founded upon a global multipolar system of sovereign states and international law. This new system allegedly stands in opposition to the fading Western rules-based model. Okay, I'm going to stop for a second because if you all know my work, you know how closely I work with the LaRouche and Schiller organizations, and here's where I think there's some definitions to be straightened out here. A global multipolar system of sovereign states and international law sounds a lot like what LaRouche is proposing. This is what I was going to say a minute ago when I said this is John's opinion, the bottom line. The bottom line is this: the future of the world depends upon individual humans insisting upon individual human rights. Because if we as individuals don't stand up, get up, stand up, then this technocracy is just going to keep on emerging and keep on restricting us and putting us in tighter and tighter boundaries. As Mark Kulak has talked about, what his vision, I think, is very apt, that they would like us all to be laying in these glass cages hooked up to video games and the internet and, just whatever drugs we needed and just enjoying the hell out of our life so they can experiment on us. Well, it may be about experimentation or it may just be about exploitation. And that's the tenor of Iain Davis's article as we continue reading. This time, rather than relying on Western imperialism, the new international law-based system will emphasize multipolar cooperation, trade, and respect for national sovereignty. There it is. It will instead be led by a Eurasian economic and technological power bloc. The apparent ongoing antagonism of geopolitics looks likely to maintain the East-West divide we are familiar with. However, what is now being framed as the multipolar order is, in reality, the multi-stakeholder order. As we shall discover, nation states are not the driving force behind the current restructuring of global governance. The geopolitical narratives we are given are frequently superficial. Those leading the transformation have no allegiance to any nation state, only to their own globalist network and collective aspirations. In their hands, international law is no more of an impediment to their ambitions than a vague commitment to, quote, rules, unquote. National governments are partners within this network formed of both state and non-state actors. Despite professed animosities, they have collaborated for decades to fashion the global governance complex that is now emerging. No matter who is said to lead it, the IRBO is set to continue in a new form. As the post-World War II system recedes, the framework being imposed to take its place is completely alien to the people who live in the former Western liberal democracies. That's us. Thus, we too must be transformed if we are to accept the realignment. We are being conditioned to believe in the promise of the new IRBO and the global technocracy it is built upon. So the idea, I think what you're getting is the idea that there is this Western Atlantic-based financial system that is perhaps in trouble. And now you have this competing Russia/Chinese BRICS type of thing that is going to get empowered because of the weakness of the Western system. And it's a big but. And the but is, don't think that's going to save us. It's not. Those two countries are already advanced into the technocracy. So for us to be thinking that the world's future is going to be determined over what happens in Ukraine, or the cyber attack from Russia, or whatever else is driving the narrative today, it's not going to solve the problem. We are under they're trying to descend a dome over us, a dome of control, serious electronic based control grid over everything and everybody. Well, let's go to James Corbett and listen to Iain Davis himself explain to James.
To the article. Once again, the link to the article itself will be in the show notes, and I highly recommend that you go and read it. But let's bring Iain Davis on to talk about this in more detail. Iain, thank you for joining the program again today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, James.
Yes,
you didn't share the video, John.
Oh, thank you, buddy. Hang on.
Neighborhood News Studio and ScreamingOspreys.com. Check it out. Oop, wrong one.
All right, let me see if I can't do this, Andy. I bet I can do it. All right, share screen.
Make sure you don't share the audio if you're playing it through your roadcaster.
Excellent. Well, I've just read the introduction to your article, so let's move on and talk about this international rules-based order, the IRBO that you identify in this article. What is the IRBO and how is it coming together?
Well, the international rules-based, well, first of all, it's difficult to pin down what it exactly is because it's been called so many different things at so many different times, by different people. International rules-based system, the new rules-based order, all these different terms get flung around by politicians at different times. But essentially what it is a set of, the idea is that it is a set of rules and regulations combined with aspects of international law, which set the framework, supposedly, for international relations. That international order, which is often highlighted by Western leaders, particularly at the moment, the US and UK, and the Germans and the French as well, often talk about it as with a morally virtuous interpretation, as is it's based on democratic principles, that it advances democracy, and that, as we're currently seeing in the Ukraine at the moment, almost, it kind of recalling Article 5 of the NATO Charter, that an attack on a democracy is an attack on all democracies, which sounds spookily similar. The idea is that the international rules-based order has a moral imperative, which stands in opposition to something that you've discussed before, the joint statement between Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin, who suggested a different model based on what they were calling a multipolar rules-based system, but they very much focused on it being an international law-based system, focused more around the G20 than the international rules-based order, which is the one that we're encouraged to support, which is based around the G7 and what we might call a unipolar world order. And it was actually Patrick Stewart who was writing for in the Washington Quarterly for the Council on Foreign, well, not for the Council on Foreign Relations in this instance, but he's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, who described what the international rules-based order is currently. the Western model.
I should interject that you mean Stuart Patrick, not Patrick Stewart.
No, yeah,
Not Captain
Patrick,
Picard.
Yeah, yeah, no, not Captain Picard, no. But he described it as follows: what sets the post-1945 Western order apart is that it was shaped overwhelmingly by a single power, the United States, operating in the broader context of strategic bipolarity. It constructed, managed, and defended the regimes of the capitalist world economy. So this idea, which is framed in fluffy rhetoric of democracy and all that kind of thing, and it is fluffy rhetoric. I think that's the point to make, because if we look at what's happening now, there is no commitment to democratic principles. There none at all. So the idea is that the US, as a unipolar power, which certainly they were after the end and the sort of dissolution of the Soviet Union, they became that in reality. They became we had a unipolar world. There was only one superpower. That situation is rapidly changing, and that situation is changing very quickly, given what's happening in Ukraine at the moment. But nonetheless, that was the idea of the international rules-based order as presented by the West, which stands opposed to the new model, which is being advocated by China and Russia at the moment.
Now, it is important to highlight that, in fact, this was very recently referenced in a statement that went at least somewhat viral by Biden recently, talking about the creation of the New World Order and how the U.S. would have to be at the front of it. He was referencing the secret military briefing that he was given the other day, where they were talking about the 60 million people that died in the first half of the 20th century before the creation of the liberal world order, was what he called it, which, of course, we can read as Pax Americana, the rise of the unipolar American empire, which has been the ordering force of the IRBO for the past 75 years. As you say, that is now being opposed by the upstarts of Russia and China and the G20 and the BRICS, who are going to form a multipolar international rules-based order, just a different flavor of IRBO. Let's talk about that, examine that, and examine the proposal that they are making for an alternative to this system.
Yeah, so in their joint statement, sort of taking elements out of that, they said today this is Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin issued this joint statement, which was interestingly on the 4th of February, so about 3 weeks before the official start of the military operation in Ukraine, and they said, quote, "Today the world is going through momentous changes, and humanity is entering a new era of rapid development and profound transformation. It sees the development of such processes and phenomena as multipolarity, economic globalization, the advent of an information society, cultural diversity, transformation of the global governance architecture, and the world order." So they were very conscious of something that has been discussed for a long time, and also, by leading think tanks of what you might call the IRBO, if we stick with that nomenclature, of the idea that power base is shifting. The Council on Foreign Relations, the World Economic Forum, all these kind of organizations have long talked about this shift in power eastwards. So it's not as if Putin and Xi Jinping were saying anything particularly counter to the prevailing narrative. That has been the argument for a long time. We've seen people like George Soros and people like that openly talk about, in his case, the demise of the dollar and the rise of China in particular as the center of a new kind of economic power bloc, a Eurasian power bloc. So what Putin and Xi Jinping were announcing, it was not new. It was something that's been going on for quite some time. But what they are proposing, this is the different flavor, is a model that is centered more around the UN. Now, the IRBO is supposedly centered around the UN and international law. But international law, I mean, unless law is applied equally and fairly, there's a concept in law which says that it's no law at all. Only law that applies equally and fairly to, in this case, in international law, all nation states can be considered to be, in effect, a law. International law is not that. So I would argue that international law is not law at all. It's just a set of rules which nation states in the unipolar model can apply whenever they choose, more as a kind of weapon to. So at the moment, undoubtedly, Russia's military action in Ukraine is technically illegal under international law. However, so was the bombing of Bosnia, the destruction of Yugoslavia, the illegal war in Iraq. They were illegal as well. But the US unipolar world order wasn't sanctioned for any of those actions. So Xi Jinping and Putin were suggesting that international law should be applied. But of course, what they mean by that is not that it should actually be applied fairly and equally, and that all nation states that international law should actually function as a law. What they mean is that they want to rebalance the unfairness of that system in their favor. You know, it's not like they've got a commitment. If we look at the way that, for example, Russia have treated people that have protested against the war in Russia, Russia isn't some kind of example of, which has been suggested by some as some sort of progressive, new liberal, fair and equal society. Russia is equally committed to what we were going to talk about, technocracy, if not more so than Western nation states. So this is not a game of right and wrong, or who's going to be a fair player on the international stage. This is a power struggle within a system that is undoubtedly the same on both sides of the divide, East and West.
The way I like
And that should wake us up that neither side, neither China nor Russia nor the United States nor Great Britain, France, Germany, the EU, the UN, of course, none of them are going to preserve our human rights. This is a fascist takeover of the world by using technological means. I've ordered the book from Iain Davis. It's called Pseudo Pandemic: New Normal Technocracy by Iain Davis. Should be getting it today or tomorrow, and I look forward to reading that. I'm going to go ahead and read some more from Iain Davis's article here at unlimitedhangout.com, which I will also share so you can read along if you want. The International Rules-Based Order, IRBO. In 2016, Stuart Patrick of the Council of Foreign Relations published World Order: What Exactly Are the Rules? In it, he described the post-World War II era as the International Rules-Based Order, IRBO. Rooted firmly in American exceptionalism, Patrick described how the so-called IRBO acted as a mechanism for hegemonic control of global politics, the world's economy, and the international monetary and financial systems. And I think we've already covered that in the interview, so I'll skip ahead. While international law is a component of the IRBO, it is not in itself a law. Professor Malcolm Chambers, writing for the UK Royal United Services Institute described the IRBO as a combination of universal security and economic systems combined with international agreement and conflict resolution processes. The current IRBO is supposedly a Western system of international norms and institutions, based upon both the World War I and World War II settlements. What is suggested as order is little more than a realization of might is right on the international stage. In the West, we've been educated to have faith in the IRBO. It is sold to us as an arrangement that establishes normative behavior for nation states. A basis for international relations is supposedly agreed upon and acceptable behavior ordained, far from being a set of rules to facilitate peaceful coexistence between nation states. The IRBO has always been a tool for manipulation. The question is, who wields it? The recent joint statement between the Russian Federation and the People's Republic of China appeared to explicitly redefine the current IRBO. Read in part, quote, "Today the world is going through momentous changes, and humanity is entering a new era of rapid development and profound transformation. It sees the development of such processes and phenomena as multipolarity, economic globalization, the advent of information society, cultural diversity, transformation of the global governance architecture and world order. A trend has emerged toward redistribution of power in the world. The international law-based world order seek genuine multipolarity within the United Nations and its Security Council playing a central and coordinating role." And the two leaders shake hands. I'm not sure, is that a Masonic handshake? I don't know them well enough to say. By contrast, the speech delivered by UK Foreign Secretary Liz Truss to the Lowry Institute, a Rothschild-backed Australian policy think tank, with a focus upon the Asia-Pacific region, illustrated the Western position. She said, quote, "Russia and China are working together more and more as they strive to set the standards in technologies like artificial intelligence, assert their dominance over the Western Pacific. They're destabilizing the international rules-based order, and they're chipping away at the values that underpin it. We believe in freedom and democracy. As Prime Minister Scott Morrison said, quote, "We know from the evidence of human history that democracies are the engine room of change," unquote. Technology has empowered people by enabling incredible freedom, but we know it can be seized upon by others to promote fear. By joining forces with the U.S., we are showing our determination to protect security and stability across the region. Taken on face value, we would inevitably conclude that while the axis is in flux, the adversarial standoff continues to a great extent. This is a fabrication. In discussing the IRBO, we immediately run into a nomenclature problem, sometimes referred to as the rules-based international order, it's other times international order or rules-based system, or occasionally the rules-based international system. Now, we seemingly need to add international law-based world order. I'll stop and make a comment. Pardon me a second. You see that China and Russia are saying international law-based order, whereas the British American system is saying rules-based order. And as we've made the point many times this morning, the rules are not really rules. They're just guidelines. And if you're elite or powerful enough, or, you can just break the rules and, fix it later. Who cares? What is more important, the rule of law or the rule of men? Wouldn't it be nice to have a real rule based order that is based upon law, and that law was based upon a constitution, and that in that constitution everybody had a guarantee of their individual rights. Wow, what an idea. Maybe we should start a country and go along with the idea of the government of laws, not of men. Why? Because men are fallible, and men are corruptible, and men are blackmailable, and men are liable to screw up, right? So let's have a rules-based order that really has rules and laws, and that's when you are the weaker parties like China and Russia, that's what you want. You want to have the law to protect you. When you're the stronger party like the Western, financial system, you're saying, no, we already have rules. You guys are just screwing up. You gotta get with the program. But the tension between those two is causing the war in Ukraine. People that are dying and suffering and relocating, and horrible destruction of cities and everything. This is tension between the Western rules-based order and Russia saying, no, you've gone too far. We're not going to allow this. You can't dominate the Russian flavored part of Ukraine by bombing it and terrorizing the citizens. And since NATO and the West are not going to do anything about it, we're finally going to say we're drawing a line. And that's what they did. Well, now that line extends around all the major cities of Ukraine, and it's a mess. It's a horrible thing. But it does represent a challenge to the Western rules-based order. The trouble is that when you realize that the World Economic Forum is just as involved in Russia and China as it is in the Western countries, and the digital-based central bank digital currency is coming, and there's nothing that we can do to stop it except for to try right now to let people know how horrible it would be if we lost our actual currency that we can spend without having to be, digitally accountable for everything. So yeah, that's the big question. Do we want to have put it another way, and let's just put this into context of British justice versus American justice, as I've done before in my shows on the statue of justice in front of the courthouse, where in America our statue of justice has the scales, a sword down by her side, blindfold on. That means the justice is going to be decided by the facts that are weighed in the scales. Who puts the most evidence in on their side and which way the scales tip decides the case. It's a technologically sound and logical way to decide things. But if you look at the British and European system, and you see a picture of that similar figure standing for justice on top of the Old Bailey in London, as we've shown, that person, there's an American justice. Thank you. That's exactly what I'm trying to say, is that the American one is justice is blind. And that means that it's the law that decides things. The law says what goes into evidence and does not, and the evidence is going to decide the case, period. Case is over. No, in the British system, if we can, maybe you can get a picture of the statue on top of the Old Bailey in London, Andy. That would show the contrast that I'm trying to talk about, which is their statue. There you go. Yeah, let's see a picture of her. Her, or see how she's standing on the globe there? I mean, this what this is ISIS in the ancient Egyptian, but if you can get closer into the face, you'll see that this particular statue does not have a blindfold. Why is that? And I submit to you that the reason is that this is a goddess whose judgments are final, and her sword is in her hand ready to chop somebody's head off, because she is not subject to what happens in the scales. She'll look at it, but she thinks, I don't care what the scales say. This guy's head's coming off. It's coming off, and there's no appeal from it, because this is the Lady Justice of the Empire. This is the Lady Justice that William Barr worships. The one that says, I am smarter than the rest of these knuckleheads, and I can decide what justice is. Now, I don't care what the evidence is. So, Russia and China are saying, give us the blindfolded Lady Justice. Well, that's because they're in the weaker position. If you're in the stronger position, then you say, no, I can keep my eyes open. I can tell what justice is without having to have a blindfold on, for goodness sakes. What do you think I am, stupid? That's the attitude. I'm smart enough to decide what justice is. And that gets right back to the beginning of everything. Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. And what does God say? It says, don't eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And doggone it, didn't she? And didn't they? And now what the problem is now they think that they know something about good and evil. And they're going to do what? They're going to judge. They're going to judge. They're going to use their small, tiny human brains to overrule what nature has provided, what God would do, everything, because they know, they judge. They have knowledge of good and evil. Yeah, the snake made them do it. That's right. Well, you know who that snake is. That is the reptilian brain. That's the urge to, the fight or flight, eat it or run away or eat it type of morality. They're trying to get us back into that reptilian brain morality with things like media and movies and everything else. How even the fashion with the women's clothes looking with leopard skins on it, and all the little two hats, the little two-headed beanie hats with that have little animal ears on them and things. They're trying to induce people back into a more of a much lower brain function, including the adoption of animalistic behavior. Isn't that what we saw with Will and Chris? No? Animalistic behavior. Just, don't sue them, just slap the shit out of them. Let's read a little bit more because it gets fairly creepy pretty quick, and I will take another 5 minutes and then let Andy get set up for the next show. And I'll just read this. While there is no settled definition for this alleged system of global governance, it all amounts to the same thing. The fulcrum may have moved, but the ruse remains intact. Isn't that a beautiful metaphor? I mean, you know what a fulcrum, right? With a teeter-totter type of thing, and here's the fulcrum, and they're saying, well, fulcrum's over here in the east, in the west right now, but and it might have moved over this way, but it's still the same teeter-totter, right? Great metaphor. The definition problem illustrates the primary flaw with any notion of a global rules-based order. It is ill-defined and transient. It relies more upon the realpolitik of the day, Henry Kissinger, than any genuine moral, legal, or political precepts. And don't let me say moral in the same sentence with Henry Kissinger. While Truss, the person who was just quoted, accurately outlined how the so-called order can be seized and exploited, she missed her audience in regard to who the abusers are. She misled her audience. Nor is the existing IRBO founded upon democracy and freedom. Her claims were a deceit. And there you get down to it. Everybody is being told that this is democracy and freedom as they're getting gradually sucked into a technologically binding world that we'll never escape from. Recently, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, the DHS, stated that undermining trust in the government was achieved by individuals spreading, quote, false narratives, unquote. And that this was tantamount to terrorism. You getting serious yet? You know, if I say, you know, I think the government is screwed up, am I a terrorist? Well, you know, it's just a word, you know. They put me in that column on the big chart. Say, oh, terrorist. Let's see. Oh, O'Loughlin. Okay, yep, he's on. Yep, pick him up. Simple as that. And then there you are in the reign of terror, which I think they want to bring on. I really do think they want some kind of a horrific reign of terror to descend upon us to wipe out the remaining wealth and middle class and anybody that is not willing to think like a reptile. In other words, no U.S. citizen has any right to question government policy. If they do, they are spreading disinformation. Consequently, the DHS suggests that not trusting the government should be prosecuted as a crime. This is the claimed justification for the focus of the new domestic terrorism unit. And isn't this why they're making this great big deal about January 6th and why it was set up in the first place so that they could have a big example? False flag terrorism. This is the claimed justification for the focus of the new domestic terrorism unit working alongside the Justice Department's National Security Division. Assistant Attorney General Matthew Olson told the Senate Judiciary Committee that the unit was created to combat the growing threat of, quote, extremism, unquote, which apparently includes, quote, anti-government and anti-authority ideologies, unquote. To question either authority or government is an extremist position, according to the U.S. Justice Department and the DHS. There is no room for freedom of speech in the government's extremist ideology. Without freedom of speech, U.S. democracy is finished. Now, the article goes on, and I won't continue because we're running out of time, but the next topic does go into the digital IDs that are being pushed along with the the passports, the vaccination passports in the EU. A very important article. You can read it yourself at unlimitedhangout.com. See James Corbett's interview in full over at the corbettreport.com. And thanks so much for helping us out, Andy DeBala and the team at Neighborhood News Studio. Everybody stay tuned for George Webb and at noon and all the great lineup this afternoon. And don't forget tonight, Professor Hamamoto will be back for the dynamic Thursday night duo with yours truly. Thanks again. Bye now.
Thank you, John O'Loughlin, for the wonderful insights on the rules-based order. I have a little video to close out John's show here of Secretary Anthony Blinken discussing the rules-based order. It's a couple minutes long, so it should close out the show here perfectly. Then we will be transitioning into Mr. George Webb himself. And don't forget, we got a great schedule planned ahead of us today at 2 p.m. We got Mark Kulak coming back from his little 2-day break to come live at neighborhoodnewsstudio.com. 4 p.m. Bill Taylor and Mr. Peter Duke himself is making his debut at 5 p.m. tonight. So we will be bringing you Mr. George Webb here after this video. But yeah, this is Anthony Blinken talking about the Russian-Ukraine conflict and the rules-based order that McDuff was just breaking down. You got something to add here right before I play?
Set this up. Great lineup. Keep your eyeballs here at neighborhoodnewsstudio.com.
Mr. President, this council was convened today to discuss the implementation of the Minsk agreements, a goal that we all share, despite Russia's persistent violations. These agreements, which were negotiated in 2014 and 2015 and signed by Russia, remain the basis for the peace process to resolve the conflict in eastern Ukraine. This council's primary responsibility, the very reason for its creation, is the preservation of peace and security. As we meet today, the most immediate threat to peace and security is Russia's looming aggression against Ukraine.